I think we'll have games about cooking, and we'll have games about poetry, and we'll have games about knitting.
Eve is like an experimental kitchen for social economies, human psychologies, creation of friendship. Like, there's so many things we've learned from Eve.
ustwo Games is a mobile games studio based out of London. We're about 40 people. We made Monument Valley 1 and 2, and most recently Assemble with Care and Alba, a wildlife adventure. And then a few months ago, we released Desta, The Memories Between, on Netflix Games. I'm María Sayans. I'm CEO at ustwo Games. I've been with ustwo for about 4 years now. And prior to that, I was with Electronic Arts for about 14 years, doing mainly online marketing and brand marketing stuff in games. And then I was with CCP Games, the Icelandic makers of EVE Online, as their chief customer officer for a few years. I grew up playing games here and there, but nothing that was just really centered in kind of in my identity. Mostly I considered myself to be like a film nerd and a music nerd, a science fiction nerd. The beginning of my career was very corporate. I was a consultant for a few years with a firm called McKinsey & Company, doing like big strategy stuff with banks and telecommunication firms. I wasn't one of these people that had always wanted to work in games, but I had always wanted to work in entertainment and popular culture, because I love the stories that we make and the power of the stories. I love how it brings people together. I went to work for Electronic Arts, and they said, "What do you know how to do?" And I said, "Well, I know how to use databases and technology to create relationships with consumers." And they said, "Oh, that's interesting. We'll have some of that, please." And I built kind of online functions and online services for about 7 or 8 years, and then moved over to the product side.
Okay.
It was a really formative part in my career, because me and the rest of the team that were working doing these things in Europe, we really felt like innovators, and we really felt like we could see a future for the industry where all games would be services, and where we felt like we needed to pool the development teams, and we needed to pool the rest of the organization with us. And I think that sense of being on the edge of something and trying to bring people with you and seeing something that from where you're standing is inevitable, but other people are like, services, who really wants to play a game forever? That feeling, and that feeling of like being a part of like a team of bandits, I was always very aware of how lucky I was to work in the games industry. And I was very aware of exactly what it was doing for me. And I was always so inspired by everybody that I worked with. But there were times when I think there was a negative thought in my mind all throughout, which is, as a woman, as a slightly older woman, at some point I'm going to have to leave the industry. Surely there's nobody around that's like me. So I thought the games industry was a little bit like Logan's Run. At some point I was going to be disappeared. And maybe I should take care of things before I was disappeared.
Has the kind of profile of people working in the industry, like how has it changed in the time that you've been doing this?
I mean, it's changed massively. Where, at the very beginning, I was very often the only woman in the room, and maybe with another woman.
Like, what are the kind of, I don't know, the biggest factors that still make it hard for people who don't fit the typical game developer profile to join the industry?
Well, one thing is to join, and the other thing is to stay, right? And I think to join the industry, being aware of what's possible and being aware of, of opportunities, seeing people like you in the industry is probably one of the biggest barriers. You can't imagine what the path in is. Of course, representation, that imposter syndrome. I again, as a woman going through the industry, I've had to come to terms a lot with my own internalized misogyny. The fact that a lot of the things that I thought were wrong or things that I felt I needed to overcome, or behaviors I needed to change, was just me echoing behaviors that I was seeing in the industry, behaviors that I was seeing in my leaders that were themselves, perhaps associated with more toxic masculinity or more toxic leadership. That ability to just develop a community, find other people like you, so that you can learn to trust yourself and learn how to kind of find ways in which you explore and express your influence, your leadership, your own boundaries of what's right for you and what is not right for you. I think that's definitely the challenge that I feel closest to me personally, because I've lived through that and I see it in my career. We definitely think about representation in games, and we make a deliberate effort to tell stories that perhaps haven't been told, tell them from a personal place that is authentic to the people who are working on the game, and also try to show characters and show places and show situations that are perhaps just not properly represented in games as well. And I think that we've had that with Alba, for example. We went out and set a game in the Mediterranean, in the Spanish Mediterranean. But we filled the village with a very diverse cast of characters, for lack of a better word. It's about representation. It's about authenticity and recognizing kind of how we live today. I think in Desta, we had a different, it was a different journey. On the one side, we wanted to set the game in the north of England, because again, that's a space that we think hasn't been, when people think about England, they think about the south. But also, mainly, it is a story about Desta, a non-binary character. And we debated quite a lot about how do we lean into that. We wanted this to be obviously a theme that is important for Desta's life, but it's not the core of the story. And it is the thing that defines Desta. Just normalizing that this is, the lived experience of many of the people who played our games, many of the people who make our games. And putting the spotlight on some of those stories that are less told. All of our games come from a very personal place. So we try to bring things that come from a very personal place for our developers, but then make it very quickly about the players and try to make them very universal. So we think that the more that you go into these places that are really relevant to you and really important to you, the more that you can find unique and universal themes that like millions of people can connect with. The point of what we're making is communicating with players, and creating experiences that players will enjoy. And it really is as much as possible about the player. I think one of the things that's really unique to the culture of ustwo Games is a strong focus on user testing, a strong focus on onboarding, and that kind of professional mindset to how do you create a product out of a creative idea. We are a B Corp, and I think we're a handful of games companies that are B Corps. And as a B Corp, what it means is that we are we recognize a commitment to people and planet on the same level as profit, right? We're a for-profit company, but we have a commitment to people, our employees, our communities, and the player base in general, and also planet, our impact on the environment, that we consider on a even level as we run the company.
Was it heavy? Did you have to change a lot of things? Like, how was that?
So it was quite a bit of work. I think what's great and what's challenging at the same time with the B Corp certification is that it's a moving target in the sense of you certify, but then you have to keep improving and you have to keep getting better. So it isn't just about I'm a B Corp today, but I'm on a B Corp journey of every year trying to improve and deliver more impact to people and planet. I think London has a special place in in culture in general, whether it's music and TV and cinema, the role that the organizations like government organizations and things like BAFTA have played in promoting that ecosystem have been quite important. And I think games can kind of has written a little bit of that.
Yeah.
Its closeness to those organizations, its closeness to those creative pools. It comes with its challenges, right? It's a very expensive city, and an increasingly expensive city, so it's increasingly hard to recruit in London. And I think it's also been a challenge because of Brexit. I mean, for us, it's become really hard to recruit for certain roles where we used to have a lot of Spaniards and Italians, Germans. We had access to a broader talent pool.
How have you seen games change as a media or a business in the time that you've been doing it?
They've changed in so many ways, but I think the way that I think about the most is in the themes and the type of games, of what constitutes a game. And I remember one of my first ever industry events when I joined the industry back in 2001, 2002. And I was just hanging out with some journalists, and they asked, where do you think games are going? And I was like, well, I think in the future we're going to see games that are not about what we think games are about. And they're like, what do you mean by that? I think we'll have games about cooking, and we'll have games about poetry, and we'll have games about knitting. And I think that's one thing. It's like games have started to relate to a much bigger part of the human experience, right? As more diverse audience has come into games, a more diverse creator talent pool has started making games. We've realized that actually there's so many elements of what people can do, what people care about, that can become games. When I think about the next frontier, it's not to go broader, but to go deeper. How do we go deeper into the human experience? How do we go deeper into identity? How do we go deeper into meaning? And that to me is where I think games are one of the places in which games are gonna continue to surprise us.
Yeah. Do you guys make cozy games?
I think we wouldn't be offended if somebody described our games as cozy games, and I think it's one of the tags that we probably use on Steam. But we think more about meaning than about coziness. How our games can create a moment that makes people reflect on their own life, reflect on the broader world, and if we can leave players feeling with a great feeling, but also perhaps with a question or with an action, whether it's on Alba, about the relationship between humans and nature, and wanting to take a step in their life, or similarly with Desta. It's cozy for us is not the destination, maybe it's more part of the journey. One of the biggest challenges right now is the power that the platforms have accumulated, and I think that's both an opportunity because it clearly is something that's working well for consumers. Otherwise, consumers wouldn't be jumping on it, but it requires that games companies adapt to working there. And I think right now you've got a problem with discoverability. A problem with sort of access to distribution, and a lack of availability of data in some cases. And I think all of these things, if we don't manage them or navigate these problems well, we could end up with games developers becoming more conservative, taking less risks. And I think that is something that would be a negative for the industry.
What is our role? What is our responsibility when it comes to fighting climate change?
I mean, I think first and foremost, we have to look at ourselves, right? And see what we can do to reduce our consumption and to be much more responsible economic agents and employers. And so that we have to do. And that work is challenging. But I think the bigger impact that we have is as content creators. We need to inspire our players to action. One of the things that we did with Alba and that we try to do with Alba is help our players become aware of their own power. There's a lot of already education out there. The question is, how do you move people to action? So making them aware of their own power, making them aware of the things that they can do in their own life, and making them have a sense of urgency. And I think the other thing that it's really important is that we invent positive futures, and that we create, that we put sort of seeds out there of what the path can be, so that we can help people imagine better futures and help them kind of, you know, motivate them towards action.
It's a ruthlessly post-utopian capitalistic society that is famous for murder, mayhem, destruction, and scams. So I'm Hilmar Veigar Pétursson. I'm the CEO of CCP, and we are probably mostly known for EVE Online, which is a game that came out in 2003, celebrating 20 years of operation in May this year. EVE is its own thing, and I think it is its own thing because it was made by kids in Iceland 20 years ago. Story kind of starts in '92. There's a company formed in Iceland called Oz Interactive, and that company I joined in '96. And just to give you a sense of the madness, so in '92, Iceland is connected to the internet with a modem. So if you showed up to work very early, you had to wait while the country dialed in before you could use the internet. And there we were, making a VRML browser to create the metaverse, like one for one described by Neil Stevenson in Snowcross.
So 30 years ago.
30 years ago. We kind of find out that nobody really needs a metaverse. And you could really argue who really needs it, even still today. But we were doing this and we learned that nobody really needs it. So then a renegade group, not that this wasn't renegade enough, went out to found CCP, and we were going to do something super practical, like a single-sharded space game made in Iceland. We had never met a game developer, not even seen them from afar. So that's why I think EVE Online is a bit in a category on its own. And it's very easy to talk about these things with kids today, because they know the difference between Minecraft survival and Minecraft creative. Minecraft creative, sure, you can be creative, you can do stuff, it's nice to experiment and whatever, has no meaning. Nothing really means anything. You make a diamond pyramid in creative mode, it really stands for nothing. If you make a diamond pyramid in survival mode, it really stands for something. It has meaning and relevance. Somebody really overcame big odds to make that. EVE Online is a game about digital scarcity. This is just what it is. You need to mine minerals to make spaceships. They get destroyed and blown up. They need to be replenished. So every action in EVE Online is about overcoming scarcity on some level. Nothing becomes of nothing. If you have things become of nothing, you have Minecraft creative mode. So digital scarcity is the foundation of all multiplayer games. It is slowly coming to be understood that games are a big deal. When you read a book, you're not making a decision. When you watch a movie, you're not making a decision. Listen to music, you're not making a decision. When you're playing sports, you're making decisions. And when you're playing games, you're making decisions. And playing is the operative word. And now we're down to, that's how all mammals learn. And games do the best job when you enable people to take decisions and learn how to take decisions and deal with the consequences. And teaching people that, or building an environment where people can learn that, I think is an extremely valuable thing. And I think in the sort of era of big cities, which are often built to increase safety and reduce consequences of bad decisions. I mean, if you live in the forest next to lions, consequences of bad decisions, pretty bad. But yeah, we have built these cities, they're safe. People don't really make consequential decisions in their everyday life. We have done UX for them to be pleasant.
Yeah.
So we are at deficiency on making bad decisions. Games are in many ways a safe space to make bad decisions. And making bad decisions is the best place to learn how to make good ones. There's a phrase in EVE Online, the best ship in EVE Online is friendship.
Okay.
And it took us a long time, like to go from, I think we started with the idea people are going to join for the graphics and stay for the community. And this is obviously true. But it's very macro. It's very community is a very aggregate world. And it wasn't really until we started digging into it. It's individual human connections that make up the fabric that becomes a community. And understanding how people make new friends, I think has been a big growth area for us in understanding the potential. And I think friendship is dying out in the world. Loneliness is the biggest health issue. So climate change is because of human activity. Our economies today are arranged in a way where about 20% of the economy is about our physical needs. It's like food, shelter, the basics. 20%. So 80% is about satisfying our emotional needs. Our brain is a very emotionally needy. And it's needy in a very social context. So this brings us into a lot of activity that hurts the environment to satisfy our emotional needs. Think of people that climb Mount Everest. So the first person that did it was doing it to be the first. And maybe that's relevant and valuable to go somewhere and check if there is something there. Is there something there? No, turns out there was nothing. He did that for purely emotional needs. There was no physical need. There maybe was a need to go there and check out, is there something there? No, it's just snow and very little oxygen. And you're probably going to die and you should get back down immediately. So there was kind of a pioneering aspect, still an emotional need. Now we have an whole industry of carrying people like me on the shoulders of Sherpas to go up Mount Everest, littering up the place with trash all over the place. Why? Why? For the emotional needs of people that can afford it, massively hurting the environment, getting there, leaving all the trash, there are a million reasons. So I say to people that want to do that, how about you just build a Titan in EVE Online and fly that around? It will give you the same thrill as climbing Mount Everest, but you will not destroy the environment at the same time. So games have the ability to satisfy this 80% of economic activity that goes into satisfying emotional needs with a fixed cost to the environment. I'm not saying AWS and a GPU costs nothing, but it's trivial compared to a plane ride and a climb up Mount Everest. So our opportunity for games is to take the greedy human brains that need all this emotional satisfaction and deliver it in a way where we can hurt the environment.
So basically, to me, it sounds like that this is like the bull case for gaming, is that like all of these needs will still need to be satisfied, but we need to find ways to do that without the emissions. And what do we have? We have sports, meditation, we have drugs, and then we have video games, which are probably the most accessible of these in a way.
Yes, I think so. I mean, I aspire to meditate more.
We all do.
Yes, and I probably all should. Again, I'm not an expert in that, but I think we can do a better job in games. And by doing a better job in games, we will reduce people's footprint on hurting through the economy and perceived obsolescence. What is happiness? And happiness, or things that generate happiness, can get classified into 3 categories. Something that gives you something to look for or hope. It's somebody to love, and it's something to do. If you make a game that gives people hope, someone to love, and something to do, you will create happiness. When I map EVE Online on these things, you would instinctively think that a spaceship game about like territorial conquest and world domination would not create love. Counterintuitively, it seems to be really good at it, and we've done a lot of study of it. But the simplest way to define love, I found from Thomas Aquinas, who was like a priest philosopher in the 1200s.
Yeah.
He said, love is to will the good of another. It is the decision to will the good of another. It is probably born from deeper feelings that are probably very wide spectrum, but the end in a very logical thing of like you will the good of another. So if we map this back to online and what we have learned, it seems to be a very dangerous place. So willing the good of somebody there seems to be a very tall order. And that seems to be relating to how you make friends. You make friends where you feel that somebody really is willing your good. And having the feeling that somebody wills your good is a very distinct one. Somebody has your back. You're willing to go to war with somebody, and they know you. They won't back out. So Eve does offer all these things, and it's built out of this principle that it's made to be a dangerous place. And there is something about the intensity and the danger and the potential from bad decisions and etc., where willing the good of another becomes very important.
So in a way, you're saying that once we're all in the matrix, we've solved climate change as well.
Absolutely. We live in the matrix. That to us is dystopic. Look at where we live, people. How does that compare? Like ruining the planet for emotional needs. And that's not dystopia? I think the matrix. It's a lot better plan. Certainly if I was a tree in the Amazon, I would rather have these monkeys in the matrix.
I agree.
Than chopping me down.
Yeah, just put your helmet on and just go sit in your cube somewhere. I'm actually kind of nervous. So that's
great.
That's a good sign.
I wasn't nervous until you said that.
So how many years does it take for imposter syndrome to finally fade away?
For me, like 15 years.
Okay.
So yeah, it's
So-
pretty bad.
So good luck to all the new games industry professionals who are watching this.
Yeah. Well, it takes like 10 years to figure out you have it. That in my case.
Fair enough. And
There
then
is a whole sort of Dunning-Kruger element to it, where you think you don't have it, but you actually do.